Right now.
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 Because it's time to right now.
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 Because it's time to right now.
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 Welcome, writers, to another daily motivation stream. Today, we're going to do what we do most days and get some writing in on our storytelling. But I have a little extra time for you. So today, we're going to be doing not one, not two, but 3 writing sprints. And for those of you who haven't gotten in your writing yet for the day, no worries. We're going to start off with a super easy sprint. We'll do 25 minutes and then make sure to stick around because we'll catch up with the other writers on the breaks and we'll see just how we're doing. I am motivated to finish the chapter that I'm working on. By the way, welcome to the community. I'm Kaufman, daily writing streamer, 600 consecutive writing streams and counting, and many, many more. So make sure to come join us because we're starting right now. So we're going to hop straight into it. And I see some fellow friends are here in the stream. Calvin, welcome, my dude. Hope all is treating you well. ML, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. How is the writing treating you guys today? Are we feeling it? Are we in the vibe? Calvin, I know you're getting close to I think you're close to the end of your next book, which is super inspiring. So we'll catch up more on the break. As you can see, I already have my writing software all set up here, and I just created a brand new song. So I get to kick off our writing sprint with a little bit of new music. Hey, what's up, Susan? Welcome. You're like, submitted my novel to an agent today. That is absolutely incredible. I am wishing you the best of luck, Susan. Hopefully the agent responds well. That must be so exciting. Let us know how it turns out and what their feedback is. That's really, really cool, by the way. Calvin, you're like, a bit slow, still have 10 chapters to go. Well, you're making progress. I felt like it's been a bit slow for me all summer, so I totally feel your pain there. All right, my friends. So like I said, we got 3 sprints today. We're starting off the first one super easy. I feel like a super easy short sprint first is really good to kind of just push yourself into the motivation. So if you're like, you haven't started writing yet for the day, this is a great time to start thinking about your characters, start thinking about your world. And if you haven't gotten into the vibe yet, you're like, hey, how should I push myself into it? Go back, read one of your favorite chapters that you've written of whatever story you're working on, or go read the last quarter of the last thing that you wrote. Use that, maybe do a little bit of revision, and then use that to get yourself into the writing vibe. Awesome. Hey, what's up, Haley? Pleasure to have you here again, my friend. Welcome back. And we're joined by Gwenna the winner. Gwenna, always a pleasure. You spent the whole day on house chores and finally have time to actually work on writing. You and me both, my friend. I am working on a crazy scene with Scarecrow. Oh my goodness. Are they going to escape? We're going to see. All right, we'll catch up on the breaks, my friends. Let's get into it. So we're starting off with writing sprint 1 of 3, kicking off with a little bit of new music, and I am all ready. So whether you are writing, brainstorming, editing, revising, or maybe you're doing some author branding, come join us because it's time to write now. All right, my friends, writing sprint number 1 success. Writing sprint number 1 success. How did you feel about that writing sprint? Were you able to get any words that time? Did you make any progress? I feel it's always interesting. I used to hate, way before I started streaming, I used to hate doing such like short like sprints. Because I was like, well, I never really get into it. But I realized when putting sprints together, 25 minutes as a Pomodoro is always such a great method to really like push myself into the vibe, to really like push myself into that first like that mindset. And it also helps that I'm at a really intense part of the story and I already know what I've been doing. Once I get to the midpoint, I'll probably have to like think for a second to for the next part of the book. But I am definitely super excited as always about Scarecrow. I would love to hear, what are you accomplishing today? Where are you at in your story? And are you working on an awesome action scene? Are you working on a romantic love scene or a thriller or a mystery, or maybe it's an escape, or maybe it is something else altogether? Drop a comment. I would love to hear. Awesome. And let me hop into the comments. I know some of you guys hopping in during the chat, during the break. Hey, what's up, Oscar? Welcome to the stream, my friend. Saw you hop in. You know, Oscar, this is a really interesting idea. Like, shouldn't there just be a website by now which is filled with chapter 1 of different writers, and anyone can just rate them out of 5? Then publishers would just look at the list and request more. Or just the customers directly. Seems like that should exist. You know what? I think what's interesting is that a lot of the power in the publishing, as it pertains to like the publishing industry, tends to be in a lot of the agents who tend to be gatekeepers in a sense, because they're the ones with the network and the resources. So I think something like that would be truly effective. I actually do believe in something like that, and I know there's platforms for that, not necessarily for writing, but I know there's platforms for that for like screenwriting. There's a website called The Blacklist, which does something similar. It's kind of like a contest framework, but a lot of producers in the Hollywood and the film industry will go to that as a resource, and it's become a pretty notable standard in the film industry. I think in something like the fiction industry, because there's such a high volume of submissions, that I don't know if there is something out there and it hasn't worked, or if nothing has been created that has that type of resource for like, all right, everyone's chapter 1, just go there and check out chapter 1. I think the problem we get into with a voting system, of like, all right, chapter 1, anybody can rate them. Then what people would do is they would take advantage of it. And the rating would be like, okay, if I know agents are looking at this web at my chapter on this, I'm just going to get all my friends to rate number 5 to push it up to the algorithm. Right. So I think something like that could be effective. I think there'd have to be a way or a system that would make it fair. Now, when we think about like reviews and things about books, obviously Amazon, obviously Goodreads, platforms like that. But those are more about reviewing. And then I think they also offer excerpts. I think there's definitely ways like, let's see your books on Amazon. Like generally you can make the beginning of the books, the beginning of the parts for free as well as samples. So, but I love the idea. I think you definitely have something there, Oscar. I just asked myself how would it be tangible and done in a way that would be effective. But I think that's a great idea. Absolutely. I asked myself if I could create something simple like that for the Right Now website. That'd actually be super cool. A little bit more of a framework than I myself would probably be able to do. I'd probably have to work with my web designer and see what that looks like. But that would be something super cool. I would love that. I would love a an avenue where anybody in the Right Now community could post like a chapter excerpt or a sample to view. Not as much about and it's not as much like a fan fiction website where you go post the whole book. That's not what it's about. I think more as a sample of your work for people to go check it out. I think that would actually be pretty badass in my opinion. And I would love to hear from anybody who knows if there's something like that out there and we're just not aware of it. I myself am not super familiar with a lot of different publishing, a lot of different advertising platforms because I just haven't done that research yet. And that's like that's like a next part of my journey. It is my goal. Probably will do a focus of it more next year, but it will be my goal to do reviews and like check out different platforms, different sites that help writers get more awareness for their books. Yeah, well, Calvin, you also have like I saw you're like I did okay, lost a few minutes due to having to finish up some stuff at work. You're also at work, so you have a very understandable excuse. Very, very understandable. No, Oscar, I love the thoughts, by the way. You guys are always totally, if you guys ever think of interesting ideas, always feel free to throw them out. I'm always interested. You guys know me, right? I'm trying to help everyone finish their book. I'm just trying to give more motivation to get more people finishing their books. And then also us learning more skills along the way so it can get more quality work out there. But anything that helps us make writing our books easier and any ways that we can use to help spread awareness for our books, I think is always a win. Absolutely. Lynn, also totally understandable. You at work, so I think that's that happens to the best of us. Yeah, and I mean, I think you're like also plagiarism could be an issue of the first chapter thing, and this is always the thing with plagiarism. Like, I've had Lynn, like, and for anybody who wants to know, I've had friends and family come up to me all the time and like, Jared, if you are putting all of your work online, like you guys know me, I've written the entire Scarecrow book online on the streams. They're like, aren't you worried that someone's going to steal it, that someone's going to plagiarize it? And it's interesting because I treat it from a very like, from a standpoint of like my work's probably already going to be stolen. Like I already assume my work's going to be stolen. It's probably going to be taken by AI at some point. There's other people who are going to try to jack it. I don't have control over that. I think what I have control is how I can be intentional with the work that I can put out. For me, that doesn't bug me personally, but granted, I also haven't gone through that part of the process. And I know so many writers, authors' works was, I know there's a whole AI lawsuit with some of the AI companies, but yeah, I think authors can already put samples of their book out on Amazon. So like I wouldn't be worried about that specifically because that's already a thing that a lot of anytime anyone publishes a book, you can already put out sample chapters. So, but I think if there was a platform for that, I think it would have to be designed in a way that was intentional on being clear on the authors and their work and copywriting and all that jazz. Yeah, and I mean that's a good point, Oscar. You're like, well, getting all your friends to rate it is the same as getting everyone to buy it. Audience sells. So you're right. You're absolutely there's a lot of similarities there. All right, my friends. Well, I'm loving the conversation, but let's hop into our second writing sprint. So, like I said, we're doing 3 writing sprints today. In writing sprint number 2, we're going to be upping the time. So we're going to push this time to a 30-minute sprint. Not too bad. This is just a little bit longer. I believe in us. So we're going to push and we're going to see just what we can accomplish in the second sprint. This time, we started the first sprint. We kind of got into the vibe of it. And now we're going to push and see just what we can accomplish. So with that, I am all set. I'll come join you in the chat during the break. And if you want to keep chatting, chat away. If you want to come join us in the writing, whether you're writing, brainstorming, editing, revising, or just trying to get in a couple words, come join us because it's time to write now. All right, my friends, that is another writing sprint. How did that sprint treat you? Were you able to make any progress that time? Hopefully. Hopefully you were. Let's see what we want. There we go. So how were you able to achieve the your word count goals that time? Were you able to get some words in? Maybe you got some more ideas. Maybe you made some substantial progress on your storytelling. I would love to hear. Drop a comment. So with 30 minutes, we upped it just a little bit. So it's like, hopefully we got a little bit of work in, regardless of where you were at. Lynn, you're like, oh, another 230 words. Hey, that's 230 more than you had before the start of the sprint, my friend. Nice, Calvin. You're like totaling 600 words. Bazinga. That is awesome. I love that. I finished the chapter. So I finished the chapter that I was working on, which is awesome. I'm going to take it through a quick revision. So I'm doing a quick review of it before I allow myself to move on, because it is the longest chapter of the entire book. It is the longest chapter of the entire book. And I need to make sure that it is justly it is justified for that length. So it's kind of interesting because I have to blow up all my text in my in the manuscript while I'm working, so that way you guys can see it on the stream. But I went back and I checked word count averages, and I was just kind of curious, like, what's the average length of a chapter for a fantasy book? And just a quick Google search said that the average fantasy chapter word count typically falls between 3,000 and 8,000 words, though some can be shorter, which is interesting, 3 and 8,000. All right, so I was just kind of curious, like what Google said, and then I was looking at my word counts for my chapters. My Act 1 chapters tend to range around 2,000 or so words per chapter. My Act 2 chapters tend to range about 4,000 or words per chapter. And then my long chapters, the ones that are, there's like these 2 or 3 chapters as we get close to the midpoint, is ranging by about 6,000 to 7,000 words. So it's kind of interesting, as I was kind of like looking and I'm like, okay. And I think it is earned. It feels natural. And I think the first long chapter, the pacing is so quick. So I'm not super concerned. I think it feels right. But I want to make sure this chapter, because this chapter is so plot heavy. It's just like one thing after the other. So I just need to see how it feels, especially because there's so many character POV swaps in it. Nice, Wyatt Sarah. Like, you took the evening to take all the chapter 1 feedback that you have received to do a first revision of it. Totally understandable. It's kind of interesting. These like chapters, as I've been getting close to the midpoint, I've been going back and doing like a second, like quick revision. Usually takes a couple minutes. And I think it's because it just these chapters are just so incredibly important. Yeah, and I just need to make sure that they they pace well from POV to POV, but nice. Why you're aiming for 2,500 for chapter word count? Okay, so 2,500 I think puts you at about like a 10 to 15 page. I think on average, or maybe about 10 page. Yeah, probably about 10 pages or so per chapter, which isn't bad at all. Nice, Lynn. So your romance aim is about 2,000 to 2,300 words per chapter, which once again, that's about the same. I mean, I'm not surprised. Romance, that's actually much more, that's much more in line. I mean, romance tends to be about anywhere between like a 10 to 15 page chapter on average. Like 7, I'd say like 7 to 15 being like the really long ones. But I think 7 to 10 is more an average that I see for romance writers. But for fantasy, readers want to get more into the story, so it's actually more commonly accepted for chapters to be longer, or it can be more commonly accepted, especially in my subgenre of action adventure. So, which is why I'm happy with the word count that I'm setting up for. Yeah, White. So I saw the pic of your main character Maeve in the Discord. It was really cool. It was like, it helped me fully visualize the character, which was pretty awesome. Nice, Calvin. You said you're averaging about 1,500 to 2,000 words a chapter. Nice. Yeah, so you're doing that around that 10 to 15 page as well then, which works. I forgot what sci-fi standards are. Sci-fi might be a little bit more in line with fantasy standards, but I'm not sure. I'd have to double check that. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really worry about it during the first draft, but now during the second draft, I'm making a note per chapter because I need to know for myself if there's certain chapters that are too long, if I need to split them up, or if I need to condense certain chapters. So I'm trying to pay attention to an average word count. Now, of course, it's not something I'm spending a lot of time on because it still has to go through the editing stage. And of course, I know word counts are going to be cut down, but I'm using it as kind of like a rough estimation. So that way I can feel the heartbeat of my book as I'm getting further through the second draft. All right. So awesome. We're going to push straight through into sprint number 3. I feel pretty good about it, my friends. I am making some incredible progress today, and I hope you are as well. It sounds like everyone's making some great progress. And let's see, by the way, if you're just hopping into the stream or you're watching this on the replay, welcome. This is the Right Now community. And if you're getting value out of this, or you just want help with a daily writing community, then make sure to tap that follow or subscribe button. We're here every day, 600 streams. If you're just wanting to hang out with other writers, do writing sprints, do critique streams, get feedback on your work, do networking, learn through different writing workshops, and go towards that goal that we are all aiming for, which is trying to finish our books. Then tap that follow or subscribe button and you'll be alerted when we go live. All right, my friends. So let's hop into it. So we're going to push sprint number 3 even longer because I believe in us. We're going to go full 45-minute sprint. We started off with 25. We pushed to 30. And now sprint number 3, we're going to round it out with 45 minutes because we really got to make that final push for this round of sprints. And I believe in us. I'm going to get through the revision of this chapter and then hopefully set myself up for the final midpoint chapter of my book as I go into the revision for that. All right, my friends. So I am all ready. I'll come join you down in the chat if you have questions or you just want to talk. But whether you're writing, brainstorming, or editing, come join us because it's time to write now.
you
All right, my friends, that was definitely quite a sprint. And I know I definitely went much, much longer that time. I think I probably pushed that 45 minutes into like maybe an hour and a half, maybe. So, but I knew like with where I was at, I had that little extra time today, and I really wanted to make some progress with, I wanted to finish that chapter that I was on. It's a good chapter too. It's a really good chapter. There's like a lot happens. My goodness. I feel like that just that chapter alone, I went on a freaking journey from start to finish. It's so good. Exactly what I'm trying to accomplish. And now I'm finally at the midpoint chapter of the book, which is crazy within itself. So glad I'm finally here again. This is such a great chapter I'm about to embark upon. So I'll get to continue on this chapter tomorrow, and we'll see what progress we can make. But thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully you were able to make some solid progress. We got a full 3 sprints, a full, what was that, hour, 2 hours? A little over 2 hours of writing today. So I feel like we made some great progress. Hopefully you were able to get some words in as well. I'll be back tomorrow with the Right Now Writers Group. 4 Pacific, 4, 5, 6, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'll be here. Come join us, and we'll see what we see. But unfortunately, you found yourself at the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers. Words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers. It's time to write
Right
now.
Sorry.
Right now, not right now, but right now. Read now, right now. Is that